I'm delighted for several things. One is that I'm going on at 2 o'clock because normally I'd be falling asleep right now after lunch, you know? And it's really hard to do that when you're standing up talking. Well, I'll try though. I don't know about you, but you know, I can't promise what's going to happen, but I'll do my best. And the other thing is that I was surprised this morning to learn that there were only, as far as I know, just now with Jackie here, three, I guess, so counting me, four post Jehovah's Witnesses here. I think I got that right. I don't think anybody else has. I thought, well, I'm going to have to change my presentation a little bit, but that's really actually a very good thing, because I was at a convention or a conference just last week in Newark, and it was 100% Jehovah's Witnesses, by them, for them, except for one person. She was Mormon, a post-Mormon, I should say. We don't like the X thing. It's like a label. Post is like where you are, you know. But so yeah, this is what we were, and it's obviously who we are today. But so anyway, and she was invaluable. I mean, because what was amazing was how crazy some of the things that she told us about Mormonism seemed to us. Like, I don't know if you've ever heard about magic underwear. Yes. I mean, you know, like what? And I was. So now we're thinking, boy, this is really nuts, you know. But then all the things that we have in common, you know, kind of made that happen. And then you start thinking, like, you know, if I get up here and told her about what my experience was, she thinks I was just as crazy. It's normal to me because I speak that vocabulary. I know it, you know, it's 40 years of this stuff. So, you know, I've heard, you know, different things from different people here with the question and answer parts, and there's a lot different about all of us, but there's an awful lot of commonality too. So I'm just going to I'm going to kind of break this up into two parts. Oh, first of all, I want to tell you who I'm not. Actually, you know, Ashlyn told you who I am, but she didn't not say that I'm not associated with the ICSA as a you know, a resource, and I don't have any kind of a PhD. I'm not a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a therapist. I'm none of that stuff. But I think I'm the only one, I think, of the 2 days. No, but I'm not. Oh, you okay? Well, okay. What I'm not. All right. Yeah, okay, unless we hear from you. But anyway, I think that's the whole idea that they had, is you know, we want to hear from, you know, experts, but we also want to hear from people that just have a story to tell. So my story is basically not so much how I got out, although that's part of it, but how I got in, and then what did I do once I was out. So I'm going to break it up into two parts, and basically the first part is how I got in. But in order to tell you how I got in, there's one factor that is the first thing that kind of broke the spell, and I'll talk about it more later, but I'm just going to tell you about it now. This is a reference from a book called The Culting of Brands by Douglas Atkin, and I don't think this book is really talking about cults per se, but it's talking about cultish holds that like certain brands have on people, like, and he mentioned Starbucks and Amazon. I've never seen it, but apparently, you know, people will defend it to the death, and they'll be loyal to this brand for no, you know, even if it's totally illogical too, you know. So it's sort of cultish in nature. I don't think anybody would accuse them of being cults, but anyway, what he says definitely applies to cults. He says, in part, tension is the management of deviance. All right, I don't know if you know if we know what those two words mean. I mean, we know what those words mean, but how does it relate to cults? So deviance is basically the balance between sameness and difference. So when you're in a cult, you're different from other people, and they want you to feel you're different, and they want you to feel superior. I'll go into that in a second, but there's also a certain amount of sameness, and they have to balance that, because if it gets too much on one side or the other, it creates a tension, and it's a problem. It's kind of hard to keep you in the cult. So many traditional cults demonize the other. I'm continuing the quote. They shame external ideas, shun outsiders, and categorize anything that's not us as the evil them. This has tremendous psychological effect of bonding community members and separating from outside forces. And I'll just use an example of the kind of mentality that exists among Jehovah's Witnesses. This is from the Elders Handbook. This is about handling judicial committees when somebody's in front of you because they, you know, sinned, and you got to decide what you're going to do with them. It actually says this word for word: the testimony of unbelievers. Well, an unbeliever is anybody that's not a Jehovah's Witness. So it's the whole world is either a Jehovah's Witness or you're worldly, Jehovah's Witness or unbeliever. The testimony of unbelievers may also be considered, but it must be weighed carefully. See, because none of you are trustworthy. You know, you're all liars. You're all immoral people by nature because you're not Jehovah's Witness. So what that does is it creates a brotherhood. we think that this person here, he'd die for me, and I've experienced, some real examples of that. And in fact, I wrote in the liner notes of a CD I put out years ago that was all songs for Jehovah's Witnesses. I said, we all have different ways of visualizing the new world. One of the things I look forward to is being able to travel the open road, that's the name of the CD, whenever and wherever we want to, in safety. Everyone we meet being a brother or sister who will open their home to us and share their experiences, as well as the things they appreciate most about the real life. We have experienced foretastes of such blessings while visiting various parts of the world and being showered with love, trust, and generosity by brothers and sisters we had never met before. I'll just give you one quick example. We did what we call unassigned territory, where nobody's preaching in a place in Kentucky. And we didn't know where we were going to stay. Should we get a hotel or whatever? And we made some phone calls. And one of the women put us up in her house. The problem is that they were at a convention in Paducah, which is what is that? Is there anybody know?
Kentucky?
Kentucky. Is it Kentucky? Well, anyway, it was about 4 hours away. And she said, well, you know what, we just leave the house open anyway, so just help yourself, go in. And it's like, I never met this woman ever, and she's opening her house to us so that we're going to actually be there for hours while she's not even home. That's the kind of thing that used to happen to us all the time. And it's kind of hard to argue with, So yeah, we're going to get to that in a minute. But basically, what happened to me is that broke. The whole thing broke almost overnight. I mean, I kind of saw it coming, but it completely broke. The brotherhood turns out to be a complete sham, an absolute fantasy, and I'll go into it in more detail later, but that's basically what got me out. So anyway, what got me in? Basically, I lived in a town called Westbury, Long Island, and middle of Nassau County. A friend of mine who I knew from the time I was about 3, I think, or maybe, certainly 5, but I knew I moved to the area in 3, and at 3, and I think he was there around the same time. We became best friends sometime in our, mid-teens, except I never knew he was a Jehovah's Witness. He didn't really, because it doesn't make you very popular, so he was kind of like what we call a double lifer, But one day he asked me if I wanted a Bible study, and I was like amazed. Like I'm 15, he's 16. A 16-year-old kid is going to teach me the Bible. You got to be kidding me. I mean, I just thought you got to be a priest or something to understand the Bible. So we did, and the first thing I learned, and that's not on my personal study, but in a Bible study setting, was that the dead people, when they die, they're just dead. Like the soul is the person, and when they die, they're just dead. Now, it doesn't matter what your beliefs are or what mine are, but I'm just telling you this is what I was taught. And I thought that was incredibly liberating, because I had read Dante's Inferno, and I never believed it. I wasn't raised Catholic, but I was always raised with the idea of hellfire. I never really believed it, but I just always thought, what if? Like, this is such a horrendous, horrific, like all eternity in agony for like 50 years of being a jerk, So that was like really, really freeing for me. And so then, as I went on, I learned more and more things, and everything I learned, I could prove it to myself. I looked in the scriptures, I cross-referenced it, everything I learned was true, what I thought anyway. So I want to tell you a little bit about life in Westbury. Eventually I got baptized, and I was 16 when I got baptized. In 1975, that was the year the world ended. I don't know if you caught that. Yeah. So, but yeah. Anyway, but the way life was in Westbury, and this is key to my story. It was very different from what I hear witnesses talk about all over the world now. Like, they talk about 1975, about being what a false prediction. Well, yeah, but it wasn't really taught in Westbury like the world is ending in 1975. It was more like a key year, in human history. And like, yeah, it could come in 75, and maybe it'll come in 76 or 80 or 90. We don't really know. So they didn't really emphasize that, except if it was like in the Watchtower. My baptism was actually discouraged. Not discouraged to do it at all, but to rush to it. They said, well, you need a little more experience. So it wasn't like coercion or anything like that. I eventually did get baptized, but I had this other experience I usually tell that I think is actually very instructive about the lack of mind control techniques that they used. One time I was probably 15 or 16 years old. I was working in a men's department store, or the men's department of a department store. And we had, I was like a stocking sales clerk, and Father's Day was rolling around, and right on the tail of Father's Day is Memorial Day. So we had this deal where you had to wear like a straw boater, except it wasn't straw, it was like plastic, boater. And it had like red, white, and blue, and Happy Father's Day or whatever. And if you, by the way, I'm going to have to probably explain some things because everybody's not familiar with Jehovah's Witnesses, but those two things are off limits. There's no holiday at all, except for one, that Jehovah's Witnesses observe. So that's verboten. And then red, white, and blue, that's obviously patriotic. Well, Satan is the ruler of the world. I don't know if you knew that, but that's the way it is. So he's behind the government, so we don't salute the saluting the flag is tantamount to worshiping the flag, So I'm thinking like, geez, I don't know if I should wear it, use this hat, I have to do it, but what should I do? So I went to one of our, I don't know if he was an elder yet, he might have been a ministerial servant, but a very good friend of mine. And I was 15 years old, so, I'm like the fatherless boy looking for help, And I just said, I laid it out and I said, what should I do? And you know what he said to me? He said, and this is probably because it was a common occurrence. I was always asking crazy questions I should have known the answer to anyway. But he basically said, Gary, how old are you now? Whatever it was, 15 or 16. Says, don't you think that you're kind of mature enough to be able to figure this stuff out? Like, why are you asking me? I can't tell you what to do, And that was my experience time and time again in Westbury. Nobody told me what to do ever. They really didn't. So where's the mind control? Well, we'll get to that later, but because there is. But and you kind of let it happen. But so I just wanted to let you know how things were very different in Westbury and how that enabled me to stay with this mess for like 40 years. So about 3 years later, I got married, and 3 years after that, the two of us went to the world headquarters in Brooklyn.
So did you wear the hat, or did
no? I don't remember. Actually, I don't. But I probably didn't wear it. I probably, because I had no problem confronting anybody and saying I'm not going to do that. You can fire me if you want, but so I probably didn't, because it's wrong. But anyway, so we went to the headquarters. We call it Bethel, House of God, and Bethel, yeah, it's a Hebrew word, Bethel, House of God. Yeah, well, I'll explain just a little bit. Around that time, it was about 3,000 people living there. It's a dormitory kind of lifestyle where everybody has a room, some little room, some a little bit bigger. And you share, the dining area and bathrooms, and everybody has a job assignment, so I worked in the computer department. And so anyway, I got to know all 15 members of the governing body, which is that's the Pope of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I got to know all 15 of them pretty well. I was at a governing body table for meals, and so we always were talking. And there's a few that I knew like through work, and a few that we socialized with in their room. So I knew these guys, and I really thought they're humble men, good men, I was appointed a ministerial servant at one point, which is basically like a deacon. It's like not an elder. I should explain this too. An elder body is what kind of runs every congregation. So it's anywhere from 3 to 15 or however men that are supposedly qualified. And they're just guys like you and me that just work. I'm a plumber. This guy's a car mechanic, and they just kind of, as a body, kind of run the congregation. And ministerial servants are like their helpers. They don't usually do a lot of teaching and stuff, but they can. So I was appointed a ministerial servant, and let's see. But then we started a family, and you can't have kids at this unless you're a governing body member. There's one that did that, but you can't have kids, So we had to leave. So we went back to Long Island. So started the family, and then I moved to Sussex, New Jersey. This is where it starts getting interesting. Moving to Sussex was a real shock to me because, even though when I was at Bethel, I saw different things that were foreign to my Westbury experience, a little bit more control, but I didn't see really serious lapses, I moved to Sussex, and it's like, this is a crazy house. And I was appointed an elder not too long after I was 28 years old, appointed an elder not too long after I arrived. And I don't even want to begin to tell you because we'll take hours, but just crazy, crazy stuff, the way they controlled people's lives, the way they were judgmental, nothing to do with the Bible, just these crazy ideas that they had. They just run with something and say that this is wrong because that's wrong. It was nuts. So I thought, my thought process at the time was, this is still God's organization. This is still the truth. Nobody can prove to me otherwise. And I know that especially when you get farther and farther away from Brooklyn, that things get a little nutty. You get guys that don't know what they're doing. They're not particularly competent, and maybe they're bad, you know. But I'd rather be part of the solution than part of the problem. The solution is helping things to change, making things better. The problem is running away from it and just letting it continue. So that was my attitude. That's kind of what I alluded to before when I talked about malignant optimism. Just a little word on that. I didn't know what that phrase meant until recently. Somebody said, "You got malignant optimism, Gary." I don't know if it's a clinical expression or if it's or how it applies really, because usually it applies to somebody that is in a relationship with a narcissist. And the idea is that the person that's a malignant optimist is enabling the narcissist to be a narcissist because they're always forgiving, they're always hoping it's going to get better, way beyond what's even reasonable to believe. They should have just got out of the relationship years ago. So it's an optimist, but it's malignant optimism. That sound good? That's not a clinical term, I guess. But so anyway, I felt the same way about the organization. I don't know if you could say the organization is a narcissist, but you can make an argument that it is. But so I saw these disturbing things, and I tried to fix it, and the results were bad. Mainly because I didn't do it right. I'm a 28-year-old kid, and I just thought if I speak up and say this and that these guys will listen, and that's all there is to it. This is what the Bible says. We're not doing it. This is what we should do. Well, it didn't work that way. A lot of political nonsense, and eventually I was removed from being an elder. Well, first I was removed from a position within the body of being a secretary, which means that you're on this what they call the service committee. Secretary is like kind of a clerical job, really. But you're on the service committee, which is like 3 elders. They're like the real elders. Mm-hmm. Everything passes through these guys, and everybody else is like, we don't have to tell them this stuff. And I fought against that. I was like, what we're all part of a body. Shouldn't we be, communicating freely? That got me in trouble, So anyway, eventually the congregation split, and that's a good thing, by the way. That with Jehovah's Witnesses, that just means that they had to form a new congregation because they had with the Kingdom Hall. There's too many people coming. So we formed another congregation, and it was actually almost miraculous. The bad guys went south, and I stayed north. And we had such a great time with these terrific guys. I just loved serving with them. But not too long after that, I made the decision at their suggestion to step down to work on some personal issues. And they said, that's what you have to do. Great, we can get you back here in 6 months, a year, or whatever. Didn't work that way though. What actually happened was people begin looking at somebody like that with suspicion, because they're like, why would Gary not be an elder anymore? And they start making up stories, and nobody quells the stories, and they start treating you differently. And then I'm talking to the elders about how all of a sudden I'm like persona non grata, and they're trying to tell me like, no, Gary, that's not the way it is. And I'm like, I'm the one that's experiencing it. I'm not making it up. Believe me, things are different. And I started to lose respect for the elder body as an arrangement. And let's see, where do I want to go next? Eventually, that led to a suicide attempt, first and last time. But the reason for that is that I was eventually reappointed a ministerial servant. I forgot to tell you that. So I was eventually reappointed as a ministerial servant, and then I started wondering. Once I got better and everything, I started wondering what can I do to reach out, to serve in a higher capacity. And the answers I got were just, the first answer was, we'll get back to you. That's a bad sign already. Like, you can't just tell me man to man, you got to get back to me. What, you got to do some research, So they got back to me, and what happened, I can't remember which one was first, but what happened, meeting after meeting, they kept adding words. Like the first time, whatever it was, they'd say, you're not reasonable, or you're argumentative, or you're this, or you're that. And it was all going back to the fact that I was trying to get things changed way back. And they're afraid that if they reappoint me, that it's going to be the same Gary again, causing division and all this kind of stuff, So basically, because of all that and making me feel really like worthless, just absolutely worthless. And I know it's hard to understand this, but basically it's because when you're Jehovah's Witness and you believe this is the truth, you believe that God is using these elders And I didn't quite take that literally. I always thought I see their incompetence because I was an elder and I did things differently than them. And there's no excuse for what they're doing or what they're not doing. But at the same time, you think, well, these are the guys that God's using in this little unit of people, this little congregation. So 2 o'clock in the morning, I'd wake up and I'd think, I'm really a piece of shit. I mean, I just, it would just create a whole downward spiral of like, I'm not going to survive Armageddon anyway. You know what that is, right? Armageddon is the final war, and then the paradise is coming after that. And you want to survive that, right? And I started thinking like, what God is. It seems like Jehovah is pushing me out. He doesn't want me here anymore because he's using. So that's kind of those thoughts, just night after night after night for a couple of years, just started wearing on my mind. And the final thing that told me, no, you can't do that, is that I have 3 kids. I don't remember how old they were. It would be like 10 to 14 or something, maybe 8 to 12. And this is like, no way, you can't, you got to deal with it, but I don't remember how, but I rationalized even that. And I came up with this idea that everybody will be better off if I'm not here anymore. So I did it the cleanest way I could think of. I didn't want to, put a gun to my head or pull out in front of a Mack truck because I thought that's just going to leave a mess, So anyway, I should have been dead. I really should have, absolutely. And the only reason I wasn't was because of a very bizarre set of circumstances that led my wife to come home about 3-4 hours earlier than she normally would have. And I was medevaced by helicopter to a hospital in the Bronx and put in a hyperbaric, yeah, sorry, thank you. I get words mixed up nowadays. Hyperbaric chamber, and then sent to another hospital, and then I went through their therapy program and everything, So that's important for the story, I think. So eventually, let's see, I don't want to run out of time here. So eventually I was just on the sidelines, is what it was. I just was more of an observer than anything else. And the things I observed were strange. It's like I'd never heard these things before. The kind of teachings of like the esteem that the governing body and the elders were held in, which was way beyond reasonable esteem that you'd want to give any respectable human that's in a position of authority. It was like way beyond that. They're like crediting them with doing things that only God can do, practically. I just started to see all this stuff, and they're redefining words, and it was new to me. I think those things had been going on actually for years. I just didn't see it, but now I was starting to see it. So I was, really getting disgruntled. I didn't really go around telling people about it, but my wife certainly knew about it because I was still being tortured by the elders, and you got to talk to somebody. So who are you going to talk to with your wife? Well, she couldn't handle that because she's like this is the part I didn't even know how to express this because I don't want to, talk about somebody that's not here in the worst possible light, because she is a very good person in a lot of ways. But frankly, she turned into like a religious fanatic in terms of her idea of what headship principle means. She took it literally, whereas I never did. I thought we're a team. She wanted me to decide, make all these decisions, and she started to see me as weak and not spiritual. So she wanted a divorce, but she stopped kind of talking about that for years and decades. Before that, she used to every once in a while, in the most cavalier way, at the drop of a hat, she'd say, "I want a divorce." It's like, yeah, okay, right. Like that's going to answer something, and we just dropped the subject. And it turns out she was serious. I didn't know that. So basically, at some point, before what I'm going to tell you about next, when I go into part two, is that I got a radio show. It was actually like I don't even want to. It'd take a while to explain how it happened, but it was like such a gift to me. It changed my life completely. But an FM radio show in Northwest New Jersey. Started out as a Beatles show, then I changed it to an Eric Clapton show, and then it became an everything show. And I used to do a lot. I was one of the 2 or 3 DJs that they would always ask to sub for like the morning show and the afternoon drive show. So I was on the air all the time. So people are getting to know me at least by name and voice, and then we do these festivals so that they connect the face with the name. So I was getting very well known in a limited area, of course, with a limited number of people. So that's a big factor about connecting with what I'm going to get to tell you. So because of her frustration, and in April 2012, our last kid left the house. He got married, so it was just the 2 of us. She didn't waste a lot of time. And July 4th, well, you know what? I want to tell you about book first because it's all in the book. So before I tell you what happened on July 4th, this is a shameless plug. I wrote this book called Force of Will with the name Tan Swiftwater because it's a novel based on a true story. So I guess you'd have to say it's fiction because of all the names of people and places are different, but in every key way, it's absolute fact. It's just is what happened, you know. There are some things that I made up a character here and there and stuff like that, but nothing that actually matters. But it's not about Jehovah's Witnesses or any kind of cult, and it's not about how to get out of a cult. It's about how it happened to me, but then most importantly is what did I do afterwards? What did I do to get my life back together? And it ends, the way the book ends, it's, you still might be wondering, well, is he in or out? Well, he's in, he's clearly out rather, he's clearly out, but does he still believe that they have the truth? Well, actually I did, when I wrote the book, I still believe that, so I didn't really cover it. But it doesn't say, you know, and then what about the cult thing, you know, how come it's not saying this is a cult? Well, it's because that's not part of the story. I wanted the story to end as positively as possible, so it's about recovery and discovery of how all this stuff happened. So that's enough about the book. So what happened basically was one night after my show, which I normally wouldn't have been doing it on this night because it was a meeting night because of a change in the congregation meeting schedule, and they didn't tell me with enough time. So I did my show. It was very, very rare for me to miss a meeting. I just never did that. But so I do my show, and people are calling in with answers to questions, and I'm recording it and uploading it to my website, and I'm doing all this stuff, and then I get a call from my son sometime afterwards. He says, "Dad, why'd you hit Mom?" I was like, "Yeah, who said what?" I was like, when, where, what are you talking about? And so we had this 5-minute conversation that made no sense. He wouldn't tell me anything. You know, I said, like, where did this happen? When? Is it tonight? A week ago? I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, it turns out it was supposedly that night. It was while I was at the radio station. I was also at home hitting her in the head, I guess, you know, and so what really blew my mind about the whole thing, and this is where we're getting to the broken brotherhood thing, is that it was preposterous. All of my worldly friends knew immediately because they talked to me on the phone when I was at the station. I mean, we had a down period where the broadcast had stopped and we fixed it together. I was there, you know, so, and a whole bunch of other lines of evidence, you know, cell phone records and parking lot cameras, and it just all proved unequivocally that she just made something up. So none of my worldly friends believed it, but guess who did? Every single one of them. Well, except for 2. I had 2 friends that said, "Yeah, I don't believe you would have done this," you know. But they didn't even care about evidence. Like, I couldn't even present it to them. They didn't really want to, you know, see it. So it took a couple of days for me to start to realize how the brotherhood started to go away. Because, well, to finish that little first part, I was arrested that night. You know, the police called me at the house after I went home, and I'm still thinking, I don't know what's going on. And they called up and said, "Could you come down to the police station?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, sure. Is my wife there?" And because I'm thinking, why would they call me unless she's there? You know, because she would frequently do these things where she'd need a ride because she got sick, and it turns out she's not sick. Very, very need oriented, you know. And I said, "Yeah, I'll be there in 15 minutes, sure." You know, so guess what? I was arrested. I was totally shocked, you know, but I guess I shouldn't have been. I don't know. There's the cockeyed optimist again. So, you know, and over a couple of days, I lost really almost all my friends, you know, because I saw it happen really quickly, and you could see it happening in Albany, and then in New Jersey, and then in South Carolina, and then Arizona. I could see it. It was like, and then when I looked at the phone records a few weeks later, I could see that she made phone calls, and all of a sudden these people, they just drop you like a hat, like nothing, you know. They don't care about verifying anything. It's just like, oh my God, you know, and then goodbye. So the brotherhood absolutely broke. I realized, and when I needed to have a place to stay that night, at least, if not for who knows how long, because I was kicked out of the house by the police. Nobody answered my calls. Nobody returned calls, you know. So it didn't take me long to realize that something was really broken here, you know. So even though that was a really big shock, it was probably good because it made me realize that this brotherhood thing is a joke. It's a sham rather. So don't be putting much stock in it. So that kind of, in addition to that, I lost my job because I'm a FINRA licensed financial advisor, and you can't have an arrest on your record. I'm sorry. I mean, it's not absolute, but typically it's like your career's over, or at least for a couple of years, So I lost my job, and she closed the bank accounts without me knowing about it, and I lost the car, I lost my house, I lost my friends. What else did I lose? I lost the love of my kids for the most part. I wasn't disfellowshipped yet, but for the most part, they looked at me cockeyed, and it was really very awkward. And I'm forgetting other things. There's something else I lost too. That's pretty much it, I guess. That's enough, right? Yeah. I guess. So what do you do with all that junk? How do you put it together, and how do you decide what are you going to do next? I mean, I don't have a place to live, so the first thing I did was I had to find out where I'm going to be tonight. I don't know. My brother put me up in a hotel because he had frequent flyer miles. But then that's day one, and so what I basically did was I just decided, and this is kind of an old thing anyway, I guess, but I just decided that I can't worry about things that I have no control over. All I can worry about are the things I can control. And of the things I have control over, which is the most important, which is the one that I have to do today. And that might be one thing. I mean, I'm dealing with 15 things. I got to get a job. The car I'm driving was like, I was literally up against the steering wheel, and you couldn't move the seat farther back because it used to be my wife's car, and it's broken that position. So I'm like, I got to get a car, but I can't do that now. I don't have a job, and I had to cancel our health insurance because I couldn't afford the premium. Just it goes on and on and on. And nothing stops. Mortgage payments don't stop. But really, what can I do today? So the first thing I did was I just said, well, I got to go back to the police station. And, the next morning, well, part of the story I left out was that the police took me to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. And I guess I passed with too many flying colors because the psychiatrist didn't really want to talk to me anymore. She's like, yeah, just go. So, well, she didn't say it like that, but if I told you what she actually said, you probably wouldn't believe me. You want me to tell you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was talking about, she's like, well, if you didn't hit your wife, who hit her, or what happened at your house tonight, and this and that, and I'm explaining it the only way I know how. And I had no sleep that day. I mean, like 20 minutes of sleep from the day before, and now it's about 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. And in the end, the reason you're not going to believe this is that no licensed psychiatrist is ever going to say this, but she did. And I wish I had a recording, I could prove it to you. She said, good luck, and I hope you get your wife straightened out. I mean, it's in the book. That doesn't prove it happened, but it's. I mean, does this sound crazy? Like, would you ever say that to somebody? No, it's, but she did, and I was like, wow, is it that obvious? But anyway, so I just, the first thing I had to do was I got to get my car keys, I got to get my car, I got to get my cell phone back because I've been incommunicado for half a day. I just looked at every one of those things as one task. I can't worry about the car until I get back. So the way to get back is I got to get a taxi. So I got to borrow the phone from the hospital, and I got to call a taxi. First, I have to find out what's the number for that. I just looked at everything as this is the task for now. I can't worry about where I'm at. And then once I got my car back and my phone back, now it's time to make some phone calls. Where am I going to stay tonight? I didn't start thinking about how am I going to start preparing my legal defense? How am I going to hire a lawyer? I don't have any money. Where am I going to get gas for my car? How am I going to get a job if I don't have gas in my car? I couldn't worry about that. I just had to worry about right now. I have to get my car. I have to get my phone. I have to get a place to sleep. And that's kind of the way I did it for like 4 years. Is I just took it a day at a time. Eventually, I got a job that was low paying and very menial, kind of dumb really, but it paid the bills. I was able to eat at least usually 2 meals a day, and I put gas in the car. Sometimes it was a trick, but. So anyway, that's how I handle the logistical stuff. But you're probably more interested in all the other things that are associated with healthy behavior. So I told you already about how I started making friends. Well, I told you about the radio show is what I told you. I started making friends like hand over fist with people from the radio station, people that I knew already, but now I said, well, it's time to really tap into this friendship and really, start hanging out together and stuff like that. And, friendships are friendships. Some are not super valuable, but some are just key. And I'll tell you about one with a very dear friend of mine who's a dear friend to this day. Her name is Cece. She has this incredible sense of humor. And I would just, once in a while, I'd be so overwhelmed with all this crap. I mean, I'd be in the car, just like 15 different things just came collapsing on me. Then I found out another former friend has kicked me out of their life, and I found out that my job, just a whole mess of different things. And I'd be like, what how am I supposed to deal with it? It's like too much stuff for one brain to handle. I would just text Cece, and she knew what I meant when I did this. I'd just send her a text and say something. And if I tell you what she said this time, I'm going to lose it. But her responses were normally just funny. They had nothing to do with reality. It wasn't like, oh, what's the problem? Tell me about it. Because I can't even tell you. There's too many problems. First of all, you're not going to be able to solve them. I can't solve them. I just want to just say something. So she just say something that would just crack me up, and that the effect that had is it would clear my mind of all this rubbish. And then when I got back to it, I'd say, okay, well, all right, that was funny, but a couple of things I have to deal with here. And I just pick one. And it's something that I can actually do something about, and that's important enough to do something about. So the value of friendships, and if you have the right kind of friends, is can't be overstated. I just quickly realized that this brotherhood's a joke. But I'm not giving up on people. The other things that I did was, talk about a sense of humor. I also think it's funny. It's good to be able to laugh at ourselves. Now, I know that it's obnoxious to tell people when to laugh and what to laugh at, especially if you're sad. Like I saw some tears today, and I saw some fear, I think, in a few faces. It's not really proper to go up and say, hey, cheer up. Let me tell you a joke. I'm not saying that. I'm not going to say that for a minute, but there are times when laughter really helps you. And you do something stupid probably at least once a week or something. I mean, I do. I don't know if you're like me, but something just like holy crap, I did it again. And you could beat yourself up, or you could just laugh about it. And it just literally clears your head. And you could hopefully laugh about your cult experience. I don't know, but there are lots of times. I remember one time when I was out in the field ministry, and it was snowing, or there had been snow. And I was walking up to this door, and the walkway was lined with hedges, and they had like 6 inches of snow on them. And I slipped, and I went like that. My feet went out from underneath me. My service bag went up in the air, and it came down with every magazine outside the magazine on the. And what I thought was the funniest thing was I wish I could have had a camera take my picture, because I just envisioned what this must have looked like. All of this snow from both hedges came on me. It was like a cartoon. It was just like, this can't even happen in real life. So I think about things like that. Well, I was doing cult work, Oh, that's not funny. That's horrible. It's the field ministry. But it was funny. I mean, so whatever. So now when it comes to friendships, I'm running out of time. I just want to talk about this for another minute. I guess I'm going to go to Q&A. It's about right time for that, right?
Yeah. You still have.
Okay. So friendships, and I know Jackie's going to talk about this, but a little bit different. I already talked about how I know some of these people, but in addition to that, I started volunteering. Well, the way I got the radio job actually was, so I volunteered at the station, just answering phones during fund drives. The next thing you know, they're asking me to do a show. So, okay. I don't know if that's karma or what it is, but I volunteer at a local theater. I donate to a women's resource center. I'm not going to go into all this, like I'm bragging or something. But the point is that if you pick a charity and either donate money to it, you'll feel good after you donated the money, or whatever it is, a used cell phone or whatever it is, and you'll help people. So, how can you beat that? If you're volunteering at a theater, that's an arts thing, I guess. It's not exactly curing cancer, but it's a good thing. It's local. I can't tell you how many people I've met there, and we all have common interests. I love music more than anything else, and so do they. So the next thing you know, we're going to concerts together. I mean, I still go to a concert by myself once in a while because there's nobody to ask, or everybody's busy, but that's okay, because I'm you have to kind of get used to being by yourself anyway, unless you're married, but so that's the value of friendships. And the one thing I want to say about friendships that I think Jackie's not going to cover, talking about the social media thing, is I've seen a lot of ex-witnesses and maybe other ex-cult people rue the fact that they've been in so long that they left without a friend in the world, because all the fellow cult people aren't talking to them, and who and they don't know how to make friends. They don't know how to do it, and they feel like the cult ruined me. Well, first of all, viewing ourselves as damaged victims, there's a time for that. You know, there's sorrow, there's you know, denial, there's anger, there's all kinds of cycles of grieving. That's essentially what we're grieving when we find out that this isn't the truth anymore, or what have you, or we leave and we find out that brothers hate me. You know, I forget where I was going with that. I'm sorry, my brain doesn't work quite well the way it used to. Well, we're talking about making friends. So social media is where I'm going with this. If you have escaped a cult and it's been, you know, 20 years or something since you made a friend, and the last time it was somebody in the cult, so you made friends by virtue of the fact that you have a shared belief, and that's not really a basis for a friendship, but that's what they tell you. So now you're out. So now what do you do? Well, again, I would recommend, you know, volunteering and doing all these different things and shared interests, shared history, and everything. But to blame everything on the cult is basically putting ourselves in a victim kind of status. And the way social media works nowadays, I personally believe that it's really crippled a lot of people in terms of making and maintaining friendships. So instead of blaming it on the cult, which it may be partly, also think about the people I'm trying to make friends with. Do they know how to make friends? I'm thinking I'm the one with the problem. I don't know how to make a friend. Probably they got a problem making friends because they've grown up with Facebook, and they all they ever see is, sorry, your father died, I'm praying for you, you know, and that's it. Like, nobody's coming over to you know, so it's just one of those attitude things where we have to take responsibility for who we are and not so much blame it on the cult, even though there's plenty of culpability to go around, because who we are today is not who we were yesterday. And you want to grow. If we're always going to look at ourselves as a victim that's crippled, we're always going to be a crippled victim. So, and the other thing I want to mention really quickly is gratitude. And this is in the second book I wrote, which is available as a PDF, but I want you to read this one first. Because the second one doesn't make sense without the first one. It really doesn't. But it's gratitude. I mean, gratitude frees your mind like you can't believe. And there's always something to be grateful for. You might even be grateful for somebody in the cult that helped you one day, or so, I don't know, whatever. But it doesn't matter what it is. Just be grateful. Express gratitude towards somebody. Send somebody a card saying, thanks for calling me the other day. I appreciate it. You know, it really, really helps. It frees your mind, and it just clears it up, and so that you can focus on the things I have to do today, paying the mortgage and all the other nonsense. I was going to play that song. Should I do that?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to play you something. I'm not going to play you a song, but I just wanted to. Let's see, where is it? Somewhere in here. Okay, so maybe you'll recognize this. Okay, so maybe you recognize that. Anybody know? It's Beethoven. No, it's Beethoven. Doesn't really matter what it is, but I'm just wasting time here as well. I'm trying to get the other one up. So it's Beethoven. It's the first movement of his Sixth Symphony, the Pastoral. One of the most beautiful pieces of music. Well, so many beautiful pieces of music, but one of my favorites. But I just want to play you something else and see what you think about this. I'll spare you. Sorry, it took a while. So if you were paying attention, you probably recognize that it's the same song, right, same piece. What was really different between the two? Okay. Was it annoying? Like, was the first one beautiful? The other one, what was the other one?
The other one was so intense.
Yeah.
Intense.
Okay.
Well, it disrupted what you could hear.
Yeah. And did you did you want to keep listeling, or did it hurt your ears?
I wouldn't listen to the first.
Yeah. So would you say it would even hurt if we played it louder? It probably would have hurt your ear.
Yes.
So did it seem like one was louder than the other?
But what if you heard the first one, the second one first?
Well, we could try that if you want.
No, touch it out. Horses out of the barn, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, yeah, because you're right away, you're just gonna turn it off, like whatever. Hopefully the second time around will be a relief, but most people would say also that the second one was too loud.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't any louder than the first one. In fact, the first one was a little bit louder because it was very hard to get them to be the same volume. All I did was I took the original and with wave editing software, I pumped up the volume enough to get all that distortion, natural distortion to happen. And then I brought the volume back to where it should be. And it's already a distorted file. So now it's a quieter distorted file. You thought it was loud, but it's not. It's really not. If you looked at the waveform, you'd see that, from top to bottom, they're about the same, but sideways, one is more dense than the other because there are all these tones in there that don't belong there, So there's more sound, but the decibels are not really different. So it has to do with our perception. We hear certain sounds and we're like, oh my God, this is awful, and it could have been just like a mouse squeaking or something. We'd be like, oh, it's driving me crazy. Or you could hear like Jimi Hendrix, and if you happen to like Jimi Hendrix, or I'm dating myself, but and he keep playing as loud as can be, and we're totally cool with it, So it's the junk in our head. It's perception a lot of time. So this is why I keep talking about like laughter and gratitude, clearing that junk from our head so that we can make rational decisions. There's a scripture in the Bible that I will not quote because I don't, but I do want to say one little part of it. Because I still think it applies whether you want to take God out of it or not. But the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and your mental powers by Jesus Christ. So we have mental powers. He's telling us that. We have mental power. We can solve our problems. The problem is that we have so much head trash going on that we think we have to solve all of these problems now. And what about this one? What's going to happen if it... And it's just head trash, and we're making problems that aren't problems, things like that. So it's just like listening to that awful music. Just turn it off, And then if you want, go listen to the beautiful. That wasn't, by the way, it wasn't the Philadelphia Orchestra. I'm sorry, but so that's about it. That's all I wanted to say, and I guess we're going to open it for question and answer now. Oh, that's a good question. And that'll bring up something else, I guess. I've been out. I was finally disfellowshipped in 2016, February 2016, because I got remarried.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you.
Yeah, you know how that worked, right?
Yeah.
The fact is that they never, I gave them all the evidence I needed to prove that I was legally or scripturally free to remarry, but they wouldn't look at it because they wanted me out. That's pretty much it. So I was disfellowshipped in 2016, right around this time, about 4 years ago. But I still believed it was the truth, really. That's the malignant optimist again. And it wasn't for about 2 years since then, I think it was 2 or 3 years after that, I just didn't have any emotional chutzpah, whatever the word is, to do any research. I just didn't want to do it. I know I'm never going back. I don't want to look at the Bible. Just give me a break, So finally, about a year ago today, I decided I was going to do some research, and that's when I realized that progressively, took me a couple of months, because at first I thought, okay, so they're wrong about this, wrong about that, but that's okay, it's still the truth. Wrong about this, wrong about that. Wow, it's not really looking good. And eventually there were things that I said, they have to be right about this particular thing, like the 1914 thing. Well, you guys don't know about that, but 1914 is this pivotal year, and everything else is based on that. If they're wrong about that, they're wrong about everything. So, and then anyway, it took me until the summer of last year to do the research on cults and determine at first, no, they're not a cult, definitely not, because of my experience in Westbury I told you about. But then I started looking at it like stop looking at it from your own experience. Look at it from everybody's experience. What's happening in congregations all over the world, and why are they teaching the way? It's because they want to teach that way. It's not. So I finally came to the other conclusion. So I don't know if that answers your question. It was long-winded, but.
What was the time period between when that happened with your wife and you were officially disfellowshipped? How long was that?
About 3.5 years. So it was July 2012. Oh, she asked when. I'm sorry. What was the time period between my wife kicking me out and all that, and being disfellowshipped. So it was about from July 2012 to February 2016. So, you know, it takes a while to get to begin, you know, be a single man. I was married for 34 years, 35 by the time the divorce went through. So, you know, I just didn't have the energy for anything else. Yes.
Do your children speak to you today or
Okay.
they disconnect?
Yeah, she asked if my children speak to me today, or are they disconnected? They're disconnected. They started treating me differently, very awkwardly, and I have three, and the oldest one was just filled with anger every time I talked to her, so she effectively disfellowshipped me in her own mind pretty quickly. My son was always there for me, kind of, sort of, but it was always very awkward. But then once I was disfellowshipped, now they have official reason to treat their dad as disfellowshipped. And by the way, that's like she was saying before, that's not universal. You go to a congregation where family members don't treat disfellowship people like they're lepers. But the official teaching now is pretty much like we don't even want to associate with people that are inactive in other words, that aren't going out in the field ministry. They tightened up a lot. So anyway, of the three kids, my son, I just talked to him the other day, and we're hoping to actually get together for like a dinner or something like that. I don't want to go into it in any more depth because in case somebody listens to the broadcast, but it's like a one day at a time kind of thing. You can't, and I always say only Jehovah's Witnesses would understand this, but I could maybe say maybe any ex-cult person might understand this. That for me to, you know, send them flowers and send them cards and call them on the phone and send text messages and send them pictures on Facebook, that would be cementing this severed relationship like you couldn't believe, because now they're going to think, what's wrong with Dad? He must be an absolute freaking apostate. I mean, he doesn't even get that we don't, you know, that like I'm disobeying the arrangement and all this kind of. So what's happened with my son recently is a ray of hope that I'm not taking too seriously. I'm just like, okay, if we get together, we get together. He's going to probably have problems if it gets back to certain people that he did that, and he knows that. But I know it better, you know. So it's pretty difficult. I'll put it this way, it's the only thing that really eats at me every day. All this other stuff, I don't care about this brotherhood. I'm so over that. I'm like, you don't care about me, why do I care about you, you know? But my kids is a different story. So
all three kids are still in?
Yeah, as far as I know. I mean, they don't talk to me, so I think they all are.
And your wife's still in?
As far as I know, yeah.
How about your second one?
She wasn't actually a Jehovah's Witness. In the book, I kind of depicted her as one because she had been actually a Mormon. I just thought it was simpler to say because it's the same, you know, in terms of the context, it's the same thing. But she had been a Mormon, and she's the one that told me about the magic underwear. Actually, I didn't believe her. I thought, yeah, okay, that sounds like some local crazy person. Whatever. Then I found out that that's a real thing.
Well, we have everything.
Smurfs, yes, I've heard about that. Smurfs are demonized. So any other questions? Yes. No. And that's the other interesting thing about the book is I didn't know how to end it. I get to the end of the book and I'm like, what? I don't know. She was bleeding. I'll put it that way. She was bleeding. Whether or not it was real blood, I have reason to think that she made the blood up.
Yeah.
Because I got back in the house after a period of time and the blood was pink for weeks on the door and everything. It was all pink. Like blood doesn't stay. So I don't know. I don't know what the answer to that is, but apparently something happened. There's some people, even therapists, have theorized that one of my kids did it to her, and she used that as an excuse. So I have no idea. No idea. Huh?
She did it to herself, maybe.
Well, she might have been. You know, like I said, if you read the book, you might draw that conclusion too. Yes.
What was the process of becoming an elder? And once you are an elder, what is there how do you come to consensus about things? Okay. Among the other elders?
So he wants to know about how a person becomes an elder, and then how does the body function? How do you come to consensus among the elders? Things like that. You don't like apply for it. It's basically every so often the elder body gets together and discusses all the young men. It's always men, by the way, no women have any, because they're stupid, obviously. You know, women can't do a damn thing, so we keep them in their place. So they observe the young men, and they'll observe ministerial servants because they're the next candidates for elder. They'll observe younger men who might be potential ministerial servants. they look at field service records. That's, you know, a record we keep every month of how many hours we spent in ministry, magazines placed, and things like that. And they just look at behavior, and when they get together, at least quarterly, supposedly, they kind of, you know, look. There are scriptures in 1 Timothy and wherever, I don't remember now, that talk about the qualifications. So they just kind of measure the guy up, you know, against those qualifications. They have nothing to do with management ability, intelligence, motivating qualities. It's just what the scriptures say about husband of one wife if you have a wife, you know, stuff like that. So then once you're appointed as an elder, it's a body. So every once in a while something comes up, and the whole body will meet and discuss the what's going on and come to some conclusion. The secretary, which is what I was at the time, will kind of notate that, put it in the file, and you know, say this is what was decided. So and so is going to meet with this person, and you know, and then but the other part about elders, there are traveling men. One is called a circuit overseer, and he comes by about every 6 months, and he's an elder. But his job is to visit all the congregations in the circuit, which there might be 12 or 16 or something like that. And he goes over those recommendations for appointments. And if he agrees, then they send it to the headquarters, which is now in Warwick, New York. And if there's a green check mark when it comes back, that means that, yeah, this guy's now an elder. You can announce it to everybody. So that's basically it.
So, but what I'm saying, is there dissent among you when you're discussing what to do, or with someone, or what should happen, and then how does that come about, and how does that get resolved?
Yeah, when he's asking about dissent among the body, like are all decisions unanimous, things like that, or how do you resolve it? Yeah, you know how cults tend to have their own words for things, and they're usually English words, but they just redefine them. One of the words that the witnesses really screw up a lot is unity. They just go to town with that. Unity basically means absolute conformity to that. So basically, every decision by the elder body should be unanimous. And if it's not unanimous, like why isn't it? If you're the one holdout, like they got a problem. And that's what was happening back when they wanted to remove me. I was too often like not agreeing with them on things. And that even goes with judicial matters where somebody they become aware of the fact that somebody was seen smoking a cigarette or drinking or whatever, so they convoke a judicial committee. Usually 3, could be 4 or 5, usually 3. Somebody's appointed a chairman. And it's the same thing. If it's not unanimous, I never heard of a case that's not unanimous. So somebody recently asked me what happens when it's not. I guess they would just let them go. I don't even know. But they try to make it unanimous, even though it's crazy. Now the governing body, if you ever do research on the governing body, that's the main elders in Warwick that run everything. I only found this out recently from reading a book called Crisis of Conscience, that they have what they call this 2/3 majority rule. So anything that didn't carry, or anything that wasn't agreed on with a 2/3 majority, which with 15 men, that's like what, 11 or 12, I don't even know, would not carry. So it has. So they're not looking for unanimity. They're looking for a 2/3 majority, which I don't know. It's kind of worse because I told you about some of the situations that they continue to tolerate because they didn't have a 2/3 majority. So the majority of the governing body thinks we should stop this, but it's not a 2/3 majority. So anyway, it's another story altogether. So, yeah.
You touched on it, and it's hard with children, but we have the experience of a couple of nieces that remain in the cult after 30 years of them not talking to us. I think it's important to honor their desire to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
And you can communicate in a lot of different ways, but if they think they're following their conscience, you can't disrespect that. And eventually, we're in communication, even though they're still in, and we're declared as peace. So I am, but
Oh boy.
I tried.
she tried. Anyway, but they've managed to work it out that they can communicate with us. A lot of years of not doing it, now it's harder with the kids, and I know a lot of people who are forced up separation with their kids, and that's hard. But still, you can't violate a person's conscience. That's it just isn't going to work. So that's just a perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Did you get this fellowship?
Yeah.
Did you try to
Yeah, and
commit suicide?
Sorry, what?
When you had the suicide attempt, did you get disciplined for that
No,
initially?
no,
Really?
no, I didn't.
Oh.
She asked if I was disciplined for the suicide attempt. No, I was not. Didn't deal with it that way.
Oh.
Yeah, and that's another thing where, you know, I've heard people say, "Oh, suicide is a murder, self-murder." That's a no-no. So, well, I don't know. I've never seen it handled that way. So it's different. Every congregation.
Yeah, every congregation is
Yeah.
different.
We just have a virtual.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we have some online. James wants to know if you participate in activism, for instance, child abuse problem, and what can we do to help?
Yes. He wanted to know, James. I wanted to know if I participate in activism, and specifically was asking about the child abuse issue, pedophilia. I guess you're talking about sexual abuse. Yeah. Yes, but I will tell you that it's a new thing for me because my attitude was live and let live. I don't think that they're the worst organization in the world. I really don't. There's a lot worse. And if that's what people want to do, that's what they're going to do. You know, I'm not going to, like, I'm not campaigning to get my kids out because it would just have the opposite effect anyway. They'd just be convinced I'm a hopeless apostate. But when it comes to activism, what I've seen are things like, you know, protesting outside the night of the memorial, which is the only holiday the witnesses celebrate. It's the evening of Christ's Last Supper with his disciples. And it's like, it's everybody's got their own thing, and I respect that. But to me, think about your audience. You know, they're just going to think those crazy apostates are at it again. I am so glad we have the truth. And you're just going to convince them more than ever we have the truth, you know. Comes to the child abuse, I believe that's a different issue because it's horrendous. I mean, I can go on with adjectives, you know them all. So recently, a very dear friend of mine out in California started this effort called Sharing Shoes, #SharingShoes. And what it is that we're encouraging people to send a pair of shoes to wherever you want, the Kingdom Hall, one of the headquarters, the branches, wherever you live, Switzerland, Australia, wherever, with a pair of shoes with a note that says something. They provide a template, but it's something to the effect of, you know, I am a pair of shoes that could have belonged to a girl named so-and-so. I'm sorry, that's not the way they worded it. But anyway, the idea is to say that I was a victim of sexual abuse by a ministerial servant in your congregation, and you did nothing about it. And, you know, just on and on and on. Trying to be as diplomatic as possible, because they will look at that as that's the work of Satan. They absolutely will look at it and say that's the work of Satan. These are apostates because they don't believe that pedophilia is an actual problem. And that's why these shows like the one that's going to be on tonight and tomorrow night on Oxygen are invaluable, because this is the news. They're reporting well, they're not reporting tens of thousands, but there are records of tens of thousands of cases, and they're reporting case after case after case. This is a real problem. And for the fact that they deny that it's even a problem indicates culpability. I mean, you know, what else are you going to deny? So I think that's different. I mean, I'm not saying I'll just do anything, because the original idea was like, let's just dump a truckload of shoes on their property. You know, and I'm like, well, I don't know who's going to pay the legal bills when they sue us for litter. You know, let's do something a little, and that has apostate written all over. You know, so this is what we're doing: a pair of shoes, a little story. Thank you for reading. You know, and maybe if one person reads it, maybe it'll help. Yes. Yeah.
I'm just gonna ask, like, how does the police respond, like, if an ex-member reports, like, a known pedophile in the community? Do they, like, investigate, or is there sort of, like, protection? Because it's such a big organization and has money.
So you asked how would the police respond?
Like, has people been reported who are known?
Well, okay. So I'll
Sorry.
regurgitate your question the way I understood it, and then I'm going to answer it a little bit differently. So she asked, how would the police handle a case of pedophilia that was reported to them by the congregation, like by the elders, I guess? You know, how would they follow up on that? Generally, they don't, because they're not notified ever.
And if they were notified by, like, an ex-member?
Well, that's a different story. Then the police would do their job. Doesn't matter who you are. You committed a crime.
I'm just wondering, like, what could be done in that regard to reporting these people, if they're still known, if there's other ex-members and maybe known.
Well, the thing is with it is that, you know, for me to call up and say, I know about this person, you know, I'm just a civilian or whatever. I say, I want to report. Well, who am I? You know, if the victim doesn't come forward, or the victim's parents, in the case of a small child, they don't really have a case, you know. What I was referring to is cases where they have reported it to the elders, because they always believe that that's where we go first. We don't take our brothers to court. You know, so a lot of the pedophilia is committed by an elder or ministers or somebody in the congregation. We don't take them to court. That's Caesar's court. You know, that's one of the words that they use. And that's a shameful thing to do. Let the elders handle it. They're the spiritual men, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where it ends. They'll handle it like, well, there's any number of, you know, instances of gross incompetence with the way they basically shame the victim. They do a lot of different things. A lot of that has changed somewhat. And the thing that's changed about reporting it to the police is that there are a bunch of, I think more than half the states of the United States now have laws that in various ways require them to report cases, even accusations, to the police.
But they don't.
They don't. What they do, you want to tell what?
No, I'm just saying.
No, they don't.
I don't think a lot has changed with Jehovah's
No,
Witnesses, except that they've gone deeper
right.
underground
Right.
with the secrets and making sure people
Right.
keep their mouths shut. It doesn't matter how heinous a 3-year-old, 2-year-old, they do not care.
Right.
They don't care. All
Just,
about their image.
and just because you probably didn't hear that, I'll just kind of repeat it. It's about their image. It's about they'll say it's about Jehovah's name. But the fact is, what they really care about is the organization and themselves, their own reputations. And I know that from the inside. Anyway, I'm not trying to bash the witnesses, but it's absolutely true what she said. What they do when they call the legal department in Warwick, and they'll basically look up what state is it, and they'll just kind of tell them what to do based on that state's laws. So if it's a state where there's some sort of reporting requirement, what they'll do typically is they'll just tell the parents or the victim, depending upon the age, that you have the right to report this to the police, and we are not going to be critical of you if you do that. Okay, that's nice. Is that reporting it? I mean, you know, that's not reporting it. You know, so they just really don't report it to this day. They haven't changed anything about it. You know, so did you have?
Yeah, we have another online. He wants to know if you have any family members with whom you can talk, like for example, are your parents?
Yeah, so he's asking about family members outside of my immediate family, my kids and ex-wife. I'm the only one in my whole family. Cousins, grandparents, everybody. I'm the only one. Like I said, I was 15 when I started studying and 16 when I got baptized. I didn't like it, but you know, I figured that's Satan talking. You know, so yes.
I'm kind of stuck on you being falsely accused of beating or hitting your wife. What did you do outside of Jehovah's Witnesses to defend yourself? Wasn't there any forensic evidence or something to prove it? I mean, I don't understand. Yeah,
that's a very good question. She asked about the incident of being accused of hitting my wife, and you know how do you prove that? You know, I didn't have to, because she dropped all the charges.
Oh, you didn't say that.
Yeah, I was gathering evidence like crazy. I mean, I had to start with, I had copies of a show that I was working on after my show was over. So I was there all night, and there were timestamps that are network timestamps that you can't change. You know, and so that was just the beginning. I had all that stuff printed out and put on CDs and everything. But then I got parking lot records and key card records and GPS records, and the fact that I had talked to people, and I ask a question of the week, a trivia question every week, and somebody called in with the right answer, and then I would send them a gift certificate for a restaurant. That all happened that night in the studio. There was so many different. I'm missing some things. Like, there was even a Yankee game that was on that became proof of. But what happened was, she dropped the charges, possibly because she realized she didn't have a case. Maybe, I don't know, but. And this again is something that I think only an ex-JW would understand, but maybe you guys will understand it too, is that what she really wanted was a divorce. She didn't want to get hit in the head. She didn't want to spend time in the hospital. She just wanted to get a divorce her way. It wasn't going to happen. She outright asked me a bunch of times, are you having an affair? No. She was trying to prove it, looking at emails, websites visited, never could prove it. So she finally did what she felt was the only way, because she's convinced, remember what we started out with, how all people outside the cult are evil, they're all immoral, all worldly people are immoral. That means that if her husband is losing a Jehovah's spirit and he's sleeping on the couch and there's no sex for a couple of years, and the first woman at work that has a, kind of a low, high skirt or something, he's, it's all over. So basically that wasn't going to happen. So she put together a whole plan to get me out, and eventually I would, once I'm out of the house, I'm alone, I would have to go, committing fornication with some women. It's like every worldly person does that all the time, right? We all know that. So that's the way she really thinks. And once she got her divorce, she just figured that she doesn't need that anymore. She doesn't need it. She just dropped the charge, because that made her look like gold to the congregation. Like, oh, look at that. She even forgave her own husband.
Yeah, but the most important thing here is how she manipulated the minds of the children.
Right.
Because what do they believe to this day? I mean,
I don't know. She's asking what do my children believe about the situation to this day. I don't know. I don't bring it up. I mean, I don't talk to two of them, but when I talk to, I've learned not to bring things like that up, because what I really want is some sort of healing, and that we can deal with the rest later. So no issues. Just did you
I'm
see this
sorry.
movie?
I'm sorry what happened to you. It's
Oh, that's all right.
a sad situation.
Well, she's saying sorry for I know people react that way, but when I wrote this book, I thought, do I even have a story here? Like, what am I going to write? Everybody kept telling me, write a book, write a book. I was like, this isn't a story. You guys can accused of doing something one time, and it wasn't even true, and the rest is a big joke. It's not a story. So I wrote it as dramatically as I could, and people that read it are like, oh my God. I said, look, you know what? This story is not about somebody that's dying of cancer with 15 kids and his wife is blind. There's a lot of worse things in the world. There really is, So I just didn't look at myself as a victim or I mean, I got pissed off at times. So, I got angry. But I appreciate the sentiments, but it's, I don't know. I just think about how many other people this could be happening to, because the only way it could work is because all of the Jehovah's Witness community have that shared mentality. It's the only way it would have worked. Otherwise, none of it would have happened.
Well, I'll end my thing, but the heck with them.
Yeah.
I just think about your three children.
Yeah.
That was
Thank
going
you.
to speak to you, and it's something really wrong.
Yeah.
It's criminal.
Yeah, and I don't know. She's saying how it's criminal what happened to my kids because of the accusations she brought, my wife brought. Yeah, I see that too. Like, she put together, she's a real big lover of murder mysteries and stuff, all kinds of spooky stories and stuff. And she's got a really active imagination, which is it's legendary actually. And I don't think she thought it through. And I mean, she used my son to give me the phone call. She used him because of the kind of person he is. And he's in turmoil. The kid is like, he's telling his own dad that So yeah, but I don't think she's that evil that she realized all the collateral damage and she did it deliberately and she didn't really give a crap about what happened to the kids. I personally don't believe that. I just think that she wasn't really clever enough. She just.
Well, I think she's evil,
Yeah. Okay, I'll accept that. What did you call it?
I second the motion.
Oh, second. Okay, yes.
I just want to make a comment, Jehovah's Witnesses is not really people that just cover it up. When you look at the Catholic Church, that whole thing. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Every organization, you can't point fingers at one and say, oh yeah, them,
Yeah.
It's all over,
Yes. Yeah, she's pointing out how it's all over. You're talking about like pedophilia and everything, right? That it's all over. I mean, the Catholic Church, et cetera, et cetera. And I agree. So you can't say, I mean, the Boy Scouts, I don't even remember. There's other organizations. I think the criminal thing is the way it's handled, because I personally do not believe that any governing body member or elder, unless they're pedophilias themselves, which is possible, but that's got to be rare, I hope. And I personally don't think any of them think pedophilia is okay, or they're happy about, I think it disgusts them. But the mindset is, it's the cognitive dissonance. Their mindset is this is what the scriptures say. Jehovah says you have to have 2 witnesses to everything to prove something. you can't violate a confidentiality. So that, how would people come to the elders with a problem if they knew that so-and-so got reported to the police? That's the kind of thinking that they can't drop from their discussion, from their their mindset. That's where it's criminal. I really don't believe that there's hardly anybody in the organization that thinks pedophilia is perfectly okay, but that's just my opinion. So, okay, yes, thanks for